Jason, since you have such a dense presentation today, I think it's okay that we get started. We'll allow others to kind of trickle in. So good morning, everybody. Thank you so very much for joining our part 4 of our basics and best practices. We've had such great attendance, and I see many of you have joined multiple training sessions, and we're very excited about that. This session is being hosted by your Southwest Commercial team. My name is Brianna Gennaro, and I am a TM or Territory Manager out of Northern California. And today we have Jason Taylor, and he is a systems engineer out of our SoCal team, and he has been very successful, and he is one in a few that really understands the AirWave solution and has put a lot of time into building his lab and getting the correct content out to all of you. I'm very excited to see what he has to offer, and this is a training that was highly recommended, highly requested. So thank you for taking advantage of it. Just a few things I want to share before we get started. We do have a question and answer session as well as a chat session, and we want to keep this training interactive today. So as Jason is going through his demo and training, he has asked that I bring up some of the questions, and he can go in and show you how to utilize these features. So we will be doing that. We'll kind of pause and answer those questions as we go. And then if we have an overwhelming amount of questions, then we can get to some of them at the end and or provide those written responses for you. The other thing is this is recorded, so we will provide a version of the recorded session as well as a feedback survey because your feedback is very valuable to us. And without further ado, Jason, take it away.
All right. Yes. Hello. Thanks, everyone. I will be on video here just for a few minutes while everything kind of gets started. Whoa. Hopefully my team's is coming through here. I see some already typing. Is my audio coming through okay, Brianna?
You sound great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, for some reason it's not letting me switch focus here on my teams, at least for now. So I'll give that a minute. But again, Jason Taylor, I am one of the SEs here on the team represented out of SoCal, but I am out of the Phoenix, Arizona area. I cover all of Arizona and southern Nevada here. I've been with Aruba for about 7 years now, a little over 7 years, and looking forward to showing everybody AirWave. Let me share up my screen. Oh, there we go. Now my team session popped back up, so that's good. Share screen 2. So I'm going to kick this off with, for those that either aren't familiar with AirWave or maybe didn't know some of the features and options, I'm going to do the tour with a small slide deck and then hop onto my system here. We'll take a look kind of at some live data and review that for the remainder of the session. Again, please do pop in with any Q&A as we go. I'm happy to answer any feedback. We can take some pauses as well as needed. I'm going to turn my camera off just to maximize our real estate here on the screen. All right, here we go. So what is Aruba AirWave? For those that don't know, Aruba AirWave is an on-premise monitoring tool for wired, wireless, VPN, any type of remote connectivity, or even just LAN connectivity. Some of the advantages that it offers over our other products like Aruba Central is that it is multi-vendor. So we can monitor tools and products that use SNMP and other types of methods versus only the Aruba portfolio. It allows us to monitor and or manage those types of products, perform things such as zero-touch provisioning and pull in alerting, kick out reporting data, and just a lot of other really cool stuff around your network traffic, your user experience, and things like that. There is an entire course that we offer. It's a 3-day course, has some labs. It's typically delivered either as self-paced or as a virtual instructor-led. So virtual instructor-led is just our way of saying you get a physical instructor. You're just doing that over a Teams or a Zoom type environment, but you do get that interaction. They teach you the material as well as then take you through the lab work and help you kind of through that. So if you wanted to grab a screenshot now, if not, we can definitely provide this PowerPoint after. Brianna, I'll work with you to get that out to everybody. So you have the links that can take you directly to some of those offerings that we have for kind of that deeper dive training that really just takes you through every component of AirWave, how to use it, and how to best apply it to your environment. So for AirWave, it comes in 2 basic flavors, either as a hardware appliance. We have 2 different capacities for that hardware appliance, a 1500 device appliance and then the 4000. So it really depends on the scale of how many devices, switches, access points, and those types of devices, or and again, not Aruba, doesn't have to be Aruba products that fit into that data set of what you want to roll up into AirWave. And then the other option here would be our VM, and that's typically how it's consumed, but not always. Kind of in this day and age, folks are usually looking to virtualize their environment. And that comes in licensing anywhere from just a single device all the way up to 4,000. Once we hit that 4,000 threshold, we'd need to run a second server or multiple servers if you had 8 or 10 or 12,000, or sorry, 8 or 12 or more thousand. We can run multiples and they can monitor the devices typically within that geo of where you're housing it. There is a pre-canned image for ESXi, and then after that we have an ISO option for you to deploy that kind of on your own equipment, either directly on bare metal if you choose to, or within Hyper-V or other types of tools that you can host the operating system in. So operating system wise, so our current, I'll say current shipping version is the 8.2, which is what I'll show you today. We're up to 8.2.15, so it's been through quite a few iterations now. It was released, this latest version, just a few months ago, maybe a month or two. But for those that aren't aware, IBM purchased Red Hat, and with that, they are discontinuing support of CentOS. So AirWave is based on CentOS, and we are now moving to Red Hat. So with that kind of underlying change, our 8.3 version, kind of that new mainline version, is the one that will be based on Red Hat under the hood as that base operating system. So that version, I believe, is already out and downloadable. Wouldn't recommend it for new deployments just yet because it is just a very new release, and that's kind of our main focus in that 8.3 version, is getting us over to Red Hat from CentOS. So scalability wise, as I mentioned, it goes up to 4,000 devices. That's not clients, that is monitored devices. So again, APs, switches, routers, firewalls, printers, whatever it is that you might want to manage. The licensing is sold per device, and it's not bound to that device, right? You can turn one off and turn something else on over time. And then we also offer a failover license, which is just a small, it's I think 15% of the normal list price. So it's very inexpensive. If you wanted to add a failover server to your environment, typically that would be depending on your requirements and uptime, your backup strategy and things like that. But one failover server could monitor and perform the capabilities here for a number of actual AirWave servers. So that's what this is showing here in this scenario. You only need to purchase one set of failover licensing, and then that would take over the failover if one of your 3 in this example servers were to fail. So how is AirWave used? I guess maybe laid out or presented might be a better way to say that. But AirWave, when we take a look at it here in just a few minutes, we start off with a couple different areas, I guess, within AirWave. Groups, it's the main kind of category that we'll see at the top. Groups are used to lump together devices that are going to have a similar configuration if you're going to be using AirWave for configuration, either compliance, maybe management versus just monitoring capabilities. The cool part with groups is that we can deploy configuration templates and snippets of code. So maybe I want to change my syslog servers across all of my 4,000 devices, right? I can prepare a configuration snippet and have it push out to the appropriate types of devices so that I don't have to have someone log in and perform that manually. It also allows us to control the firmware across those devices if you wanted to upgrade or downgrade them. The device folders or devices and folders, they're called. It's how we now logically group devices, really more around alerting, reporting, and some of the other pulling the statistics and the details about what those devices are actually doing. So it's a 2-tier type of environment for us to be able to break those devices out. And then again, we can manage I didn't talk about the management. We manage devices in that main group using variables. So we pre-can in a bunch of variables, and we also have the ability to kind of customize our own. So if you did have an environment where you wanted to create variables for different portions of your configuration, your banner, and different things like that, we can add in as many as we need so that you can provide that to different devices based on maybe your geo or something like that. You can change the variable values kind of as you go. And then a little bit more here about how AirWave is laid out. I'm just we'll take you through this. It'll make more sense when you get to see it, but I wanted to touch on the different areas kind of as we click through AirWave and take a look at what it has to offer. We have a section called Clarity. This has been around now for a couple years, and it's really designed around being able to provide us information typically on our wireless environment for events that could provide a bad user experience but aren't necessarily the wireless causing the issue. When folks have a wireless problem, they just say, oh my gosh, my wireless doesn't work, right? Nobody thinks, hey, maybe I'm trying to load a web page that has 500 DNS requests and my DNS server is slow. That is very impactful to that user experience, and it's sometimes hard to troubleshoot. So Clarity pulls in data about the Wi-Fi association. So how long does it take for my device just to attach to the access point and say, hey, I want to be a client of this SSID on this access point? That number should typically always be very, very small, right? A few milliseconds or minimal. The authentication timer, if you're performing any MAC authentication or 802.1x authentication, how long did it take for my server to reply and actually give me the thumbs up and say, yep, this user is good to go? Those types of timers usually within a second or so is acceptable because depending on how you've configured your roaming and other types of things, if you're doing full authentications every time you roam and you're walking down the hallway there at the office on a phone call, Those authentication delays could cause blips and issues for you along the way. DHCP, right? How long does it take to get an IP address? And then the DNS, of course, that we talked about. Clients, these are going to be just all of your attached devices. So well, your phones, your computers, anything that's authenticating or attaching to the environment there, VPN, whatever it is. Reporting, we have some very extensive reporting. We also have a really cool reporting guide that helps you kind of walk through customizing and scheduling your own reporting. So maybe every Monday you want to walk in and see the reports from how well things did last week, or capacity planning every month. Whatever those types of scenarios are for you, we're pulling in and ingesting all of this data, and the reporting gives us the ability to actually do something meaningful with it. Triggers, these are in my opinion, basically an alert, right? This is when a trigger is when you say, I want to know when something happened. So when my device fails, right? Of course, I want to know when my device is down. That could be bad if it's not a planned event. I want to know when my PoE budget is at 90% on my switches, or there's devices with interface errors. If you're managing your configuration within AirWave, maybe I want to know when a device has gone out of compliance. Maybe I didn't lock something down and a different admin logged in and made a change on that device. AirWave has the ability to push and overwrite that configuration change, or it could also just perform a trigger and alert you and say, hey, you know what, this configuration is different than I'm expecting, and I wanted to let you know about it. For the clarity thresholds, this is also a really cool item. We added this as a trigger maybe a year or so ago, a year or two now, where we can actually know, right, when one of these values is actually over an expected threshold. And back up to clarity, these are configurable thresholds for your environment. So maybe your DHCP server performs a ping before it issues that IP address. So your baseline is a second or maybe 2 seconds, depending on your timeout values. Typically, we might see that as a high value for getting an IP address. So you can tune that to meet your environment and your needs. Alerting. So this is really the output, I guess, if you will, from devices that come in. So your switches, your wireless, those types of things that kick out an SNMP trap are typically what shows up in the alert category here. So we'll see some of those, typically just MAC address roams or things like that can show up. Some of those are tunable for you as well. Rapids, so this stands for something I've drawn a blank. It's basically your wireless intrusion detection. So rogue AP, I guess, intrusion detection service could be what it stands for. I'm just drawing a blank. But the idea here is AirWave is monitoring not just your wireless environment, but your wired environment. So your wireless knows to a degree when someone from home brings in a store-bought access point or something, they plug it into their desk port because they're not getting great wireless in their area. So they plug this in, and maybe they're just using an open network. Maybe they're using WPA3, whatever it is. It's not my access point in my area, but your access point environment may not be able to see that that's actually plugged into the LAN network and that user is actually connecting to their own home device SSID and then getting into my network, potentially breaching security, right? If that's near a window, someone could be in the parking lot and attaching to that device through wireless and landing right on potentially an unprotected network within your environment. That's something that you want to know about. And if the access points aren't able to see the subnet and the VLAN that user would attach to on the switch, they'd have no idea for sure that that's actually a breach of the environment. So with AirWave, we could be monitoring the switches, we're monitoring the wireless environment, and we can put that 2 and 2 together to actually say, you know what, I'm seeing this client in the air and through my access points, and I'm seeing it on my wire coming through the network somewhere. This is an actual rogue device and I need to know about it. Maybe I actually want to use AirWave to kick off that trigger, right? An email alert or something else. Or I want to perform some containment on that. AirWave can also enact the containment of those types of devices for you too. And that would be through that Rapids environment. And then the last category here that we'll take a look at, visual RF, which is really neat. It allows you to import floor plans. So I guess if you back up, and we'll see this here in a minute, it's about 4 tiers. So your main home screen of visual RF can show you your entire environment, right, with little bubbles of maybe sites per state or something like that. So then you drill into that site, and then from there, you could drill into your actual building, and then you could drill into the floor with that floor plan on it. And it allows you to place access points, draw walls, do all of those cool features and functions that you'd want to be able to help analyze your wireless environment. And then it's going to actually show you the heat map. If this is a live environment, it shows you how do things look today? What does this actually look like right now? If you're doing this for predictive purposes, it's just going to show you that kind of expected coverage area based on the distance, the wall types you've put in, your access point placement, your ceiling height, all those different variables that you can configure. Visual RF can take that into account for you. We have some customers who just purchasing a single AirWave license gives you access to visual RF, and they use that just for predictive heat map planning, either for their own customers or new offices and things like that. So it allows you to kind of plan out that entire office space. And then the live heat mapping is really neat because let's say within an Aruba wireless environment, one of my APs kind of in the middle fails. The surrounding APs can detect that. They say, hey, you know what? I used to be able to see this AP. Now it's dropped out of my cluster. I need to increase my power 20% because I'm one of those couple neighboring APs, and we need to help fill in that coverage gap. So you'll actually be able to see, and you can record and play back even the heat map data, where you can see like that AP fail, and then the other ones kind of juice up the power a little bit to provide some good coverage to the users that would be otherwise potentially in a dead zone or at least a low quality signal area. So really neat tool, component within the tool, I guess, or product. With that, Brianna, I'll take a quick pause here. I don't know if we've had questions come in. I'll wait to stop sharing in case we had anything about what I've covered. And then if not, we'll head over to the live demo.
So far, we don't have any questions, but this is a perfect time to ask questions if you guys have them. So maybe let's give it a minute. And then if not, I think they are anxious to see you get started with the live demo.
Yeah, I'll at least stop the demo here, but I can pull that back.
That's always the fun part, right? I don't see any trickling in, so I think we're good to go. Everything was very clear, concise. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's maximize this screen, stretch it here as much as possible. So I'll preface this demo with the fact that just personally, for a lot of other testing and some other reasons, I've moved my home environment over to our Aruba Central Cloud platform, so I don't have some additional data that I would have otherwise. But I do still have a couple environments here, one that I've stood up just for the test or for testing here for this demo. And my dad owns a small RV park over in New Mexico, and I'm monitoring his devices through AirWave. So we'll be relying a lot on the data that's coming in from those environments. So we'll be able to still take a look through and see plenty of good, useful data here for us, but just wanted to at least throw that out there. I did that about 2 or 3 months ago here at home. I still have my controllers being monitored so we can see the cluster and things like that, but the APs that I have here at home will show offline. So this is our home screen here for AirWave. I've logged in. I guess I'll just show you real quick the main login page. I have set up AirWave. Oops, I think that's it. To use an LDAP server that I have at home, and it's also front-ended actually by ClearPass for those that may have attended ClearPass, but essentially it's doing a radius authentication. It can also perform a TACACS authentication or just use local accounts. So whatever you would prefer for your environment. And similar to other products, that authentication request can put me into a different category of user, right? So maybe I logged in here as Jason, and I'm getting full admin access here at my house. But if I logged in maybe as my wife's name, I could have her set up as a help desk user, right? Performing the same authentication, but based on her Active Directory group membership or other credentials, she's getting a different level of access. Maybe based on what site those users are in, they can only see the hardware and categories within AirWave that would be under their control or their area. So it is really possible to kind of segment out the levels of access and the types of access that people get based on the radius attributes or TACACS attributes that come back. So we'll take a look at that here in just a little bit. The AirWave banner here at the top, I have done a little bit of customization on this. The main thing that I'll point out, and I'll show you rogues. So this is what we were talking about there before with Rapids classification. I'm expecting to see rogues here because I have set up a lab environment and it's on a different wired environment. And we're seeing these clients, right? So I have clients that are attaching. These aren't just suspected rogues such as a hotspot or something that's interfering in my environment, but this is something that maybe you would want to action if you see an actual rogue within your environment. I have some good clients, a VPN, so some good data here for us to take a look through. Right away, we're going to see just some variables here. We can start clicking through to see the different usage and things like that over time. We can also change the sources. So I'm looking at some different SSIDs. Actually, the two up here, these are the ones on Aruba Central here, so I'm not going to see those anymore. But I'll add in these other two. These are the ones that I've been using for some lab testing. So in the last 2 hours, we'll see a little bit of traffic. I have one of my other computers that joined it, and I kicked off a little bit of traffic there before our call just to have some data. We can see the average. If I look at average, the max data maybe, right? I want to do some capacity planning. We don't start summarizing the data here until that week threshold. And maybe even I want to go back to a year, right? I want to say how long or how much data have I been using on these particular either SSIDs, or maybe I'm looking at some wired switch ports to my internet provider, right? I want to be able to just take a real quick look and kind of see what it is that I need to trend for. Maybe if I need to worry about upgrading circuits or internet services and things like that. Oh, and here we go. We can see. So yeah. So back in middle of March is when I had dropped off my and migrated my home network there. So we can clearly see, right, trending along just fine and then zeroed out. We can also just see a little summary here at the bottom. So of all the different folders, so the device folders, remember that's where your statistics and things like that come from. If we keep scrolling down here, We're going to see that same number, the rogues. We'll take a look at those here in just a minute. And then again, I'm monitoring my dad's RV park, or we can see somebody with a Roku, clearly just using that probably as a streaming TV service, pretty popular type of option there for him over there. So we're going to see a lot of just kind of streaming data and then some other information as well as we go through. The traffic analysis, so using an Aruba wireless environment, we can classify our data based on over 3,000 different applications, I think we're up to about 3,500, 3,600, something like that we can classify, as well as web reputation. So if you haven't taken advantage of those types of features on your environment, it's already baked into our Aruba Instant portfolio. And then you would need there's a web category and filtering capability if you have a controller-based environment. But that's where some of this type of data will come from. I'm just monitoring an Aruba Instant environment today. So that's where we're going to see our data kind of broken out. Again, we can just kind of click and see what that looks like over time. So all those numbers will just change for us, right, based on the time period that I'm picking. Applications, let's say, hey, you know what, I want to actually see a little bit more detail, right? If I click on this, I'm actually going to see, okay, not classified, right? So some type of maybe a VPN or some other service. But let's say I'm really concerned about Amazon Video. I can actually come on over to either the user roles or the devices. Oops, I'm off a row. And see who it is that's actually using this traffic. So I'll just go on the user roles. So a lot of folks here at the RV Ranch, right? Then if I click into devices, I can see what those devices are. I can change some of these values, but if I click on one of them, I keep drilling in, seeing, oops. Oh yeah, device type, that's why. And then actually see there how much that user's been passing. So really neat. You can drill in, see a ton of data. You can also use this type of information in your reporting, see destinations, things like that. Our user roles. So if you're not familiar with the Aruba user roles, that is essentially it's a layer 7 firewall policy that gets assigned to every user whenever you join an Aruba network. So if you don't have our policy enforcement firewall engine, those users typically just land in what we call an authenticated role. But either way, they still get a role. That role contains a VLAN and potentially your own filtering capabilities and whatever you might allow, disallow, QoS. But here I can just see kind of the breakout within my environment. I am able to see
I
my
do have a
wider.
question,
Oh,
Jason, if
sure.
you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem.
It's related to your presentation right now. So one of our guests says, ours shows no data available on traffic analysis. What are we missing? We use IAP.
Okay, sure. So
Mhm.
I will start up a new tab here real quick. Oh wait, actually, hang on. Drag it over here. So yeah, that's a great question. So there are some flags that you'll just have to turn on to actually have that data come on over to AirWave. So this is a lab environment here that I'm testing with. So to actually send the data, it's not on by default. So that's probably why it's not coming through. So right here under the configuration system, we need to make sure app RF visibility is set to all. By default, it's set to none. So apps would just be those 3,500 or so applications. WebCC is our web content and classification. So the website type of data. We pull, for whatever reason, it's a round number. It's exactly 1 million records from WebRoot. They are the provider that we pull from to get those top 1,000, or sorry, 1 million, did I say 1,000? 1 million websites and different categories of the most popular to classify into that suspicious, the trusted. But then beyond that, I'll show you here in just a second, we can also classify them as malware, proxy avoidance, right? A VPN, key loggers, those types of categories can be classified through that WebCC category. Web advertisements, I block that here at my house so that I don't see advertisements quite as much. But anyway, that needs to be turned on, set to all. URL visibility, I toggle that as well. And then for the clarity data here that we're going to take a look at in just a minute, I think that's in a different spot. Yeah, I think that's under services, clarity. And when we look here in just a minute, these are the types of features that you're going to want to toggle all of those so that you're seeing the other data here that we're going to look at in just a minute. That's also very helpful and meaningful for you in AirWave. So hopefully that covered it all. There may be one other toggle. I think that was it. I believe that's it. That should get you the data as long as you do have your configuration here under, or as long as your data is going to your AirWave server and you're monitoring it, that will turn on those other capabilities for you. I'll
Thank you,
click
Jason.
on, sure thing, yeah. And thanks for the question. Because as you can see, right, it's some really neat data for us to take a look at and use. So maybe I want to also take a look, and I'll go quickly here. But I want to see all of the data that my stereo is doing, right? What is my, and this is on a wired Ethernet port on a switch that I'm monitoring. Let's just take a look at the applications. Here we go. So we can see that that's checking the Pandora, right? It's performing. I don't want to say the name here or I'm going to get a beep in the background, but it's checking with my Amazon device, things like that. So this is all just getting pulled and fed through. This is actually coming off of my controller because this is a tunneled user that's then getting that full layer 7 firewall capability performed and monitored on that traffic. So UCC, I was trying to get a call going, but my phone wasn't switching over to Wi-Fi calling. UCC, though, is where we can actually look at the data, like when a user is doing a Wi-Fi call or something along those lines. And it's going to show us not the phone numbers and any sensitive information, but it's just going to show us the call quality, the jitter, how long it was on for, and things like that. So if somebody does say, hey, you know what, I was doing some Wi-Fi calling and my call was pretty bad, right? We can start drilling in and seeing some information here. So that's what the UCC category is for you, at least. RF performance. So some helpful information here. Again, most of what we're looking at is an RV park, so we're going to see a lot of clients. There's only 3 access points covering, I forget, a couple acres, however big the park is here. We'll look at it in a bit here when we pull up Visual RF. But a lot of the clients aren't getting great quality, but they're getting enough. We can also see that most of them are using the 802.11n. So this is all going to be 2.4 gigahertz, right? Because there's some towers up there, and that's going to get us the best possible signal, at least through a metal RV from 200 feet away. So we're using, we'll see it here in a minute, some mesh that also shows up. So we're doing mesh on 5 gigahertz because one of them is just too far away. We didn't want to run fiber optic all the way out to the other one just to provide some services for the couple users at the far end of the park. But it's able to show us some cool information. Who's got the lowest speed? Usually when you're seeing 0, these types of devices are attached to the network, but it's probably a phone or a device that's in a sleep type mode and it's just barely heart beating to check in. The devices that we see here on the AC, those are my computers here that I'm testing with. So If we click on more, we can see some great information about those devices. And even along the way, right? Well, these values here are clickable. So if I click on one, I can see here's my computer. And this is, well, the other computer, at least that I had joined the wireless network for some authentication details and things like that for us. So I'm only a few feet away from my access point. Of course, I'm going to get a great quality of service. But it's very helpful information for you. RF capacity. This one's just showing us basically how good and how much are my radios using over time, how noisy is the environment, and by default it's just going to show us a week. I'm not sure if we can change that value, but we could zoom in. So if I wanted to, up in the top right here, I have a folder right now. I'm looking at top, which is going to cover my entire environment. But if I wanted to, I could look at just, so this is my environment here at the house for the lab. Just the lab environment, right? That should always be pretty good, pretty solid. And if I switch over to the RV park, well, still pretty good in general. We're seeing a little bit of higher utilization out there. So we can kind of take a look and potentially use this type of information to help you perform some access point planning. Maybe you're seeing some folks in high utilization areas and you want to be able to take a look and see what's going on. It tells us the access point that's at the top. What device is it that's so bad, right? Well, these are just transmitting a bit of data all over the place, even though it's a wide open space. The clients are so far away, there's latency just within the air and then contention that ties up some of the usage there. And then here we can actually start to see more information on the time zones and the different times. So we can see overnight, right? Traffic dies down and then, people wake up and start sending data. So some really neat stuff. Error match. This is just going to show us our channel distribution. So I have a 6 gigahertz, but again, that's over in central now, but it's going to show up as a default. But within your environment here, it gives you, especially when you have a lot of APs, it's going to show you if you have any gaps within your environment and or any APs that are maybe you're not set up to use the DFS channels, right? If you look at this graph and you don't have anything from 52 to, I think it's 149, if your graph is completely blurred out on the 5 gigahertz band, you're not utilizing DFS channels. So you're either at an airport or maybe you haven't turned those on, but that's a lot of airspace potentially for you to use just by doing some configuration changes and help to improve your environment. So that would definitely be something for you to look at and take a note of. And 2.4 gigahertz, if you're not using 1, 6, and 11, you're actively causing problems for somebody. Like, say I'm using channel 2, I'm bleeding into channel 6 and pretty heavy into 1. So I'm now causing issues on 2 different other types of devices potentially within my area. So you want to make sure those typically are always going to be on 1, 6, and 11 when you go to look at that. And then we can see some information about why things are changing. So if I am at an airport and I am using DFS channels or very, very close to an airport, I might be picking up some radar signals that are going to show some reasons down here. There we go. So radar detected, right? Empty channel. Hey, you know what? I saw that nobody was using this channel, so I moved over to it. Well, who did that and when, right? So we can take a look. Or the DFS channels there. My radar, I am picking up a lot of stuff. Oops. I need to know who that was. Okay, well, here we go. And basically my access point heard a signal on this channel and FCC says you need to vacate that channel immediately. I can see exactly when that happened and then what channel it moved to. Clarity, this is the fun one. I really like looking at the Clarity data because, again, this is showing me information that gives me a bad user experience or conversely, right, a good user experience. If all these numbers look good, as they do here, I would say these all look pretty good. My users should be in good shape. I don't have a lot of authentications here, so some of my devices I was putting in sleep mode and things like that. My authentications don't look the best, but it's overall not too bad. Association, very quick, right? Within 2 milliseconds. Here's a bad one at 12 milliseconds. So that's how narrow the typical threshold is for this. DHCP, everybody's getting an IP address really quickly, and DNS is looking good too. They're color coded, right? Even across the top. And if I scroll on down, I can see, hey, you know what? This DNS server is performing the worst, and 186 milliseconds isn't bad, but you know what? Maybe I want to switch and use Google based on whatever this one is. It's probably a CenturyLink one. And I could do a little bit better. So it gives us that type of information. And then if we click on details as well, it expands it out. We can see a little bit more here. I must be in the wrong spot. Can export it. Okay. Oh, that was what I was thinking of. So if you wanted to take a look at that detail over time, so we're just averaging right now, right, the last 2 hours. So I can see I had one really high spike, and that's kind of what's skewing the results for that one server. So not too bad. If it was consistently always pretty high, maybe you'd want to take a look at why that DNS server is taking so long. And over here, we can even see the users then based on the MAC address, kind of what their experience is like. So you can see the information in a little bit different way. And that does follow back to those clarity checkboxes, right? You have to toggle all of those on within your access point for that data to flow over. Topology view. This is probably going to zing out funny. Yeah, there we go. But this is a dynamic map of my environment, which is really cool and very helpful, right? Depending on what I have going. So I have my main switch. I still have my controller cluster. I'm still using these for VPN and some other stuff. So I haven't turned those off, so I can see them online. And then, you know what? I'm coming off of this. If I mouse over it, I see the switch ports that these are on, right? So if I'm up top, we'll take a look here. I've got 2 ports going here. If I click on that, oops, click on it, there we go. I can see the ports that are being used. And then I can even see a little bit of information about them. How are these ports doing? What's going on here? I want to be able to see that and potentially be able to either take action on it, or, you know what, my documentation just isn't right and I need to know where those go. It lets us take a look at that. And then here I can also even show, pop in my access points. Gives me a water break. These are all showing offline because AirWave isn't managing them, but the data is still there because they were online and I haven't deleted them yet. So we can see what those are. If we mouse over, there we go, the middle of the cable, we can see again even the interfaces that they were plugged into on the switch, as well as the access point, of course, would typically be ENET 0 on those. So really neat data. We can also, I don't have spanning tree enabled, probably, but you can see a spanning tree view if you have spanning tree going within your environment. So that type of view could also be pretty helpful. And you can tweak your view around a little bit depending on how you want to be presented with your data, right? So different methods for looking at the same type of information. The mesh, not super common, right? But people use mesh every now and then. I'll just show this to you so that you can see that we actually have some mesh information. And you can actually take a look at, I don't know if this one's going to have any data. Oh, yeah, old data. We're not, that one's offline. I may have to do, I don't know if I have the data for that one, but you saw it there on the main one. So you can see at least the type of mesh information. You can see your throughput and some other details regarding that. Network deviation, I'll just click on it. Might take a bit to populate. So last time, yeah, okay. I
Well, it's
did this.
populating. We do have
There
a
we go.
question.
Yep.
Can I jump
Okay.
in?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So one of our guests is asking, what if you have over 1,000 switches? Is there a more efficient way to organize if by site in regards to the topology that is?
Oh, I gotcha. So so within that, so what we would do, we could click on a particular type of device, and over in one of these, there's a way to make this the root. Do we, oops, um, details. Maybe let me change this back to the top down. There is a way to make that as oh, here we are, set as a root node. So you can see the data a little differently. I don't know if there's a way to um, remove a section of hardware other than the types of devices. So I don't think so. So obviously that's going to get pretty messy. I'm not sure offhand, honestly. Can take a look. There are AirWave hosts all of its own documentation to make it quick and easy for you to look at. I'm not sure on that one if we can remove sections of that or not. I believe it's the entire environment, um, but there may be a way to prune some of that. I'll have to take that as a follow-up.
Okay, sounds good. I'll notate that one. Thank you.
Okay, items. Yep, I'm noting it too. Yeah, thanks for the question. The network deviations, this is just going to show us, it usually takes a bit to populate when you're looking at too much information. But it's just going to show us if things look kind of out of norm, right? Your standard network deviation type of views. Documentation. So as I just mentioned, we can see all of these types of docs, download them, whatever else. I think I mean, it's probably helpful to have choosing the right server hardware, but you've already installed it, but someone else could could click on that and pull it down for you. These are also all published though on our ASP portal, so Aruba support portal, which is asp.arubanetworks.com. If you don't have a login there, you can get one and pull those docs directly as well. And then we also have documentation around interfacing with AMP, so pushing data through our XML APIs if you have a need for that. A lot of the Aruba portfolio, well, all of the Aruba portfolio has some degree of API type of capabilities, or as far as I know, maybe not our UXI sensors, but I think that's coming if it's not there. But just some great ways for you to maybe pull or push data in from a different tool that you're already using, being able to use that locally. Licensing, and then user info. This is just where the user info is how you can customize this little bar at the top to be more meaningful for whatever your environment might call for. You can also set the refresh rate of that bar at the top. Typically, I think it's 5 minutes by itself. Clicking the browser refresh button will refresh it. But if not, you could change that value for you as well. And then you can also set your idle timeout before it would log out your session. So let's take a look here. Oh, and actually, well, yeah, we'll take a look here and then we'll pop down here in a few minutes. Groups. So this is again where we manage devices that have a similar type of configuration. So I have a few in here that I was going to pull up for us to take a look at. I'm going to start with our 2930. So I have a little, we call it an 8-port switch. It's officially 10 port because there's two uplink ports as well on that. Okay. Yeah, it's not. I'm not seeing much data on this one. We'll be able to pull some of that in. But what I wanted to highlight here was the configuration. So the configuration is different than I'm expecting. So what happens here when devices are attached to AirWave, AirWave pulls in through a combination of SNMP and assuming the device supports it, so a normal switch or access point, it will SSH over to that device as well and pull configuration. It's going to maintain that configuration backup for you too, which is really helpful to be able to go in and say, hey, you know what? I want to see what my configuration was yesterday or a month ago. This one I haven't had on as long. I'll pull up a different switch, but you can see that configuration history for me. It's tunable, but mine goes back to December, and I can compare different versions. So I can say, hey, you know what? Whoops, I want to look at my one from the 11th to the one, well, I don't have enough options here to my baseline though. And I can actually see what's different, right? So as I scroll through, if I had more differences, those would show up there for me. So, and I made that change here so that we could see a difference and see that it's mismatched. If I click and edit this one, I'm going to make this my baseline configuration. Now I'm going to save it. AirWave is actually going to go log into that switch and do a comparison and say, okay, from 6 hours ago, this configuration that I grabbed, does it match the current running configuration? I'll just click off. It's going to show us verifying. So right now it's verifying the configuration. In just a minute here, it'll have performed that action. So while we're waiting for that, I'll give you a little view here. Now we're in the device section, by the way. I've zoomed into one unit, right? One device. So I'm looking at it. I'm monitoring it only, and I'm allowing firmware upgrades. You can disable that feature if you want to have monitor only mode, but don't allow firmware upgrades through AirWave. But AirWave does have the ability to be your firmware repository, so you can up and downgrade your hardware, whatever the case may be. And then manage read and write as well if you wanted to actually perform the configuration work through AirWave. That is possible either through, as we talked about before, templates with variables. So I could have that template configuration for everybody in this group, and then I could configure down here, I could set up some variables and set different values. So my IP address could be a variable instead of using DHCP, which is what it's doing today. Well, this I can set it here as well, but you could set that, or you could set your local NTP servers or something maybe that we're not already seeing within this configuration. Maintenance windows, maybe that building gets turned off every night from 2 to 3 a.m. Or every Friday. You can set that so that you're not getting alerts about those types of things as well. And now if we come back down to configuration, my configuration is good, right? It matches the baseline. It says, hey, you know what? I just looked right now and yep, still good. So, so a really cool, really powerful type of feature for us. And AirWave just does this by default, right? You start monitoring your devices. If it can pull a configuration from it, it will. So I'm monitoring one of my other devices here. It's a Palo Alto firewall. It cannot pull the configuration from that, but it can monitor it. So I get usage statistics and things like that from that device. Let me head back up to group. And then I'll head in here. Something that I wanted to point out, because we did talk earlier about licensing, but I just want to make sure that everybody has an idea on that. Licensing in AirWave is per device monitored. So per really what that comes down to is per IP address. So so here I have 2 access points. I can see the 2 here. you might be saying, why am I seeing 3 devices instead of the 2, right? Well, one of them is my virtual controller. It's in the Aruba Instant controller, and that has a different configuration than my base access points do. But it's virtual, and we don't use a license for that. It just happens to, it's going to show the little star based on who is managing that virtual controller at this moment. But that wouldn't consume a license. So if you had 100 APs, you would need 100 licenses, even though you might see, if you had those broken out into 10 different clusters, right, you're going to see 110 total devices because you'll end up seeing your virtual controller. On the
Dave,
switch, yep.
can you do a mass configuration of mismatched devices to baseline configurations?
I don't believe a mass configuration, no, because those, but you can do it based on the group. You can pull in a template configuration. So I was going to do that actually here. So if we click on down to templates, so for me, the access point here, I'm going to edit this one. So say I had a bunch of devices within this group or this cluster, I could click on one of these, fetch the configuration. It's actually going to go out, talk to that device, pull it in, and automatically variabilize it for me. I can turn some of these things on and off, or plug in my manual variables if I wanted to. And then if I save this and save and apply. So save and apply, by the way, there's a lot of places within AirWave that you're going to see a save and apply, and then you get a scheduling option, which is really handy. So when this could impact your network, it gives you the ability to say when, right? Apply changes now, or I want to figure out if I'm doing it regularly or at a particular time. I want to do it this Saturday at 2 a.m., right? And then I could click on schedule, and I could go back and cancel that later if something changed. I'm going to apply now. The change that I had was just a wired Ethernet port, and that was why that one port was showing a mismatch. So now if I come on back into here, we're going to have to wait for it to pull, but that should show, oh, actually, the template would still be the same. I think it's going to show, it'll still show a mismatch. But you could, so there, I don't know if there's a way to globally push and maybe correct the mismatch, because we don't know what that mismatch is necessarily. For me, it's this Ethernet 1 port that I had set as an uplink so that it would show up as different. But if it was something, say, on your switch environment, so let me take a look back in my switches. So if mine were showing a mismatch here because that NTP server, right, I could run a configuration snip change. Oops, configure an audit job. I think I actually have to, okay, here we go. So I could actually say remove an NTP server, right? These give you the options to do that. And then I could just say 3317. So if this is why it was mismatched, I could definitely configure that and have it run against those types of devices, and then it would update. So if you knew why and it was a global reason for the mismatch, you could. But if it was individually, right, they could all have something a little different. And there wouldn't be an easy way to just fix that without applying a base config. If my devices were in management mode, so if I come back to my switch, oops, oh, this is a different switch, sorry. Come on in the settings on this one here. Oh, I'm in the wrong spot. If that switch was in a management mode, though, I could say, you know what, I want to overwrite whatever configuration is on that switch with this configuration, and I want to enforce it. That's another option. So those switches will always have a good, valid configuration that I know and trust. And anybody that would go make a change, it would get overwritten with that configuration as soon as AirWave detected it, which is every 5 or 10 minutes by default. So that would be another option for you. I have one of my customers. They do basically trade shows across the country several times a year, and depending on where they're going, they have different configurations, and depending on what switches they're bringing. So they just come into that group and they change the template that would be used for the groups of those hardware, and just apply it based on what trade show they're at. And they plug everything in. The management VLAN is the same, but all of their wired port configs and things like that are different based on where they're going. And it just pushes out that configuration and then it maintains it. So that is kind of some of the benefits or the options on how to use that. But other than that, no, the mismatch could be per device. So you'd really want to know, likely anyway, you'd want to know what that is before you just try to do some kind of a bulk update, unless you already had your good and blessed configuration. But the templates here, this is where, just like we saw in the other one, we can pull in the template by reading in the device. It's going to create all of the variables for me. I can go ahead and add in and create my own variables. This is where I could populate things like NTP server 1, NTP server 2, NTP server 3, whatever the case may be, that I'd want to configure that wouldn't necessarily be part of that template. I could plug those in and then I could localize them based on where that switch was that needed those. So I could have switches in other areas, right, that need to talk to something local instead of something remote. Firmware, it does give you the ability to push different firmwares to various types of Aruba devices. I believe, yeah, we can do firmware for a lot of other hardware as well. It was showing me the hardware that I had checked boxes for, but right, it's a multi-vendor tool. You can push firmware to a huge number of third-party devices. Some of these you hopefully don't use anymore. Trapeze is pretty old, but we had the ability to do it, so we left it in there for you. And then you can pick the type of method, right, that you want to use for that. Just as a time check, okay, we're still doing pretty good. I did want to show some really neat views here. So within at least our AOS portfolio of switches, so our 2900s, our 3810s, our 5400s, also the 2500s, those types of switches, we're still selling at least many of those, maybe not all of them. Some of those have been getting phased out with our Aruba CX offering. So our 6000 type series, so we have 6000, 6100, those types of numbers, and then our 8000 series and our 10,000, 9 and 10,000 series. Those are our newer ones, but our AOS S model switches, at least, currently, that's where we have the really neat views within AirWave to see some cool information about it. So I'll show you a CX switch here in just a moment as well, so you can kind of draw your own comparisons. But this is just a quick view of that switch. But then, hey, you know what? I want to actually look at this switch. Okay, well, yep, cool. These are the ports that I have up for my lab. If I had some other information there, I could plug them in. I can search, that type of stuff. PoE, I want to know how I'm doing. I can see the 2 ports that I have drawing PoE power and how much, right? The other ports are just connected. The ports got zero power, but it is connected. That's why we're seeing the 0 there. VLANs, just the normal type of information, but it's neat that it's showing us that view, right? Our LLDP neighbor data. So I can actually see, hey, I have a 303H on this port. My uplink here my lab switch, and then it's not, I didn't configure a sysname, but we can see at least that's a 325 access point. So it's pulling in and now populating that LLDP information for me. The hardware data, and then if there were any alerts or events. So I'll take a real quick pop back over to my lab switch, click on this one. This is also, again, an AOS S switch, but I just wanted to show you because I had one power supply down. I only plugged one of the two in so that we can see that there is an event there or an alert. If we click on over, oops, to hardware, there we go, one power supply down. Shows you the temperature, right? Whatever we can pull from that, we're going to be able to see it. Not sure why the CPU just went up recently, but anyway, what's connected, right? I just have the one port on there. Just this was really just to show another switch, and if we have time, I'll show you how we go about adding devices within AirWave. Manage. Oh yeah, we already looked at this screen. This one is in read and write mode though, so I could actually use AirWave to push the configuration to that device if I wanted to push a snippet or something else. But just looking at the time, we probably won't be able to do that. But I did at least show you that view, right, of how you can see AirWave with the config snips. You could also have the entire configuration selected, right? And I could say this configuration is going to get applied on these devices no matter what. Just taking a quick look through on my notes here to make sure I'm covering all the right components I wanted to show here. IMP setup. Users and roles, we touched on this earlier, but as you create devices, AirWave's going to create a username, just kind of an internally used username for those types of groups. They typically aren't used and needed, but you can, if you want to, use them. But typically what we're going to do is use a role, and the role is actually, this is what's getting passed back from your Radius or TACACS server to actually define the type of access that I have. So my server is passing back this role here, AMP admin ClearPass CPPM there, and I'm getting a full admin role. But if I did want to pass back either a user or a folder type role, we can create a new one maybe for a help desk. Help desk role. We can decide what level, if we want the type here, if we need read, write, and then maybe, right, regionalize. So if they only need certain folders, we can give them that, and then it's going to give them all the folders below that. So if I had subfolders set up, which I don't for a smaller environment, but you could have subfolders, right, based on your state and then down to your city and then to your building or however you might organize it. It would give them access to the components under that top folder for them. Rapids, again, that IDS type component, visual RF, we can decide, right, what we want for that user or that role rather. And then if my tool passes back and says, okay, I logged in and it's Jim in the help desk, Jim gets role called HD role, and he would be able to look at everything in the folder Greg T and below. And it would be read-only. Monitor read-only access. So that's kind of how that section is utilized. The authentication, that just defines your authentication servers. Back up to system, I wanted to, show real quick the performance. This one has a lot of really neat data. I'm not sure how to interpret it all. We do have a guide that helps you, but if you're having any problems within your AirWave server, there's a lot of information in here that we might be able to utilize through attack case typically to help you figure out kind of what might be going wrong and how to best correct your issues. So some neat graphs in there. We'll change baseline. Oh, add a device. So two things in here. I did want to show the instant GUI config. So right now, when I flipped back over to this guy earlier, oops, I don't have that set up for access. We're going to notice I have this configuration tab. Now it does say I'm managed by AirWave on my instant access point cluster here. It's really monitored by AirWave. And I can tell because that configuration tab is there. So I wanted to come on into my cluster here. Click on over, I think, is it this one or manage, save and apply. Oops, and I forget if I had, so instant GUI config. So for those that are familiar with, come on. I refresh, okay. So in progress, I wanted to make sure I have instant GUI configuration. I think that was in the screen. Wrong device. Nope, I'm in the wrong spot here. Let me apply this as well. Typically, we just have to apply it once. I must have clicked into the wrong spot. But what I wanted to show here, and it'll show up in just a minute. Oh. All right, well, we'll see what happens there. Well, that's the fun with the live demos. I've lost my way here trying to show the instant GUI configuration.
You're doing great.
I think it's the little gearbox here. No, there's a little checkbox for instant GUI config, and oh, here we are. Yes. Okay. Save and apply. So we'll set that. So for those that are familiar, it takes a few minutes, and that should be getting caught up. I guess we'll give it time and see what happens here. But the GUI config, it will take a minute here. And then it's going to show me the configuration options. Instead of using a template, which is cumbersome, right, and more error prone, it's going to let me do that through the GUI. Here we are, if it's loaded. Okay, and it did. So this is at least what I wanted to show. So it looks pretty similar, right? It's not quite instant, but it has all of the same settings. So as we click through, we're going to be able to see all the same settings that we had before and tweak and tune those kind of as needed. RF, right? Whatever we might want to set or change. Those will be within here. The virtual controller. I might have done something wrong. Oops, when I was getting that set up. But at least I wanted to show you the view in here so that we could take a look and just see what that looks like for you. But
I think we lost you, Jason. Jason, are you still there? We're unable to hear you right now. Yes, just stay with us for a second. I'm going to try to reach him. Looks like he's rejoining. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, well, sorry about that uh,
That's
drop there.
okay. One of the
Um,
guests said you're doing a good job, so he's going to
uh,
give you a break
all right. Well, thanks.
or
Yeah,
give
I'm not sure.
technology a break.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. My internet went down, but my network was up, but I couldn't reach the internet. Right as the mail truck pulled up out front too. I wonder if that's related. All right. Hopefully the screen is coming back through here.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Everything
Thank you.
looks good. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. Very odd. But anyway, the instant GUI configuration here gives us another option. And now if I flip back over here, I haven't even refreshed, but the screen refreshes itself. I don't even have that configuration option. So because the management is now hooked to AirWave, it's going to stay on AirWave. As a follow-up note, if my connection to AirWave fails, um, this connection will, or this configuration option shows back up. So maybe I've pushed a change to my access point cluster that breaks it, right? I put in a bad gateway, or I remove the DNS, or something happens. It can't find its home back to AirWave. It re-enables that configuration option for you so that you can correct it. So AirWave, the access point uses HTTPS to talk to AirWave, so that can traverse the internet if you want to do that based on your endpoint IPs and things like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be local for you. It doesn't have to have its own VPN or something like that, which is actually how I'm doing it or used to for some of my sites. So devices, I will show how to add a device here real quick. I'm going to go to my lab switch here. So this one I just added yesterday. And it was really just so that I could show you how to add something. So it's in here right now. Scroll it on down. Here we go. I'm going to delete this switch. Actually, I need to remember the IP address. Oh yeah, I've already set that up. So delete. And I see my count. Oops, up top it went from 5 to 4, and now that switch is gone. So for adding hardware to AirWave, there are a few ways to do it within an instant access point. Under that administration tab, when that's available to you, you can plug in your IP address or DNS name of AirWave and a shared secret if you want to validate that, and it'll find its way that way. But for switches or other third-party hardware, we may need to add it differently. So it's a two-parter, and this is something I wanted to point out. It's in our documentation, but it's easy to overlook or forget about. But when we go to communication here, we can see, right, all of the hardware that we have something already kind of pre-canned to support. And then you're going to see universal network device. So my printer and my Palo Alto firewall are universal network devices. I'm just monitoring them well, the printer really, just because my kids turn it off sometimes, and then I have to walk back and forth a couple times to turn it back on before my print job will go through. But anyway, what we do need to configure in here are the credentials. So if we don't configure our community string, and or if we're doing SNMP v3, but still your string, your SSH, username, password, and that type of information, when we add the hardware, we're immediately going to get an error. It'll still add, but then we have to go in and reconfigure this. So if this information changes for you per device, it's just something that we'll have to either import the hardware with a list, so that these values can be associated properly with each device, or you'll have to just change it individually as you get those added. Which also reminds me, I didn't finish talking about, I think we had a question and it diverted my line of thought, licensing. So one of the cool parts with our licensing, again, it's per device that I'm monitoring. So right, I have 100 APs, I need 100 licenses, and then maybe I want to monitor my switch or my firewall's other data so that I can see where problems might be occurring. I need a license for those, but say I have a stack of 10 switches, 48 port switches, 4 uplinks, right? I have 52 ports on that switch, and I stack them. I now have 520 ports with a single IP address. I need one license for that. So some cool economies of scale there. I can monitor every switch port on that stack, 520, with a single AirWave license. Now, just something to note is that if your plans change and you have a lot of stacks, right, and then you need to break them apart, you now need to purchase the delta of your licensing based on how you're changing things. But if your stacks are planned to remain, you only need one license for that stack. So it can really be a good cost savings, especially when you compare it to some of the other tools in the market that license per port that you want to monitor. The value of AirWave can really start to shine, and that those stacks aren't just Aruba stacks. So manually here, this is where we can add our hardware if we did want to import the devices with a CSV. We can even download a sample file. It's going to show us, look at that, there we go, custom SNMP strings, all of our other info, whatever we might want to plop in there. If those variables change per device, we could do that. Or we could just go ahead and plug in that IP address. If we just click on add, it's going to take us to a screen where we could type it all in manually as well. So that's an option for us. I'm going to go ahead and dynamically discover mine. So I set this up yesterday. That's why it still shows 1, but I'm going to go ahead and scan it again. Should just take a moment here to scan. And then we'll give it just a second here, refresh. Some customers have this set up to scan public across their entire environment weekly. These can be scheduled and public or private, right? You want to know when somebody brings something in that's unsecure. You can arrange for that to notify you, so you don't have this potentially unsecured gear sitting within your environment. So now I'm going to go ahead, oops, we've scanned it. I have one new device up top, so I told it basically when it shows up, don't put it in a group, just put it in as my new device. So here it is again. I'm just going to go ahead, I'll add the device. I could also do some other options. Maybe I had to RMA it, I could replace it. The idea here, and we could have done that in a different spot as well, is that I don't want to lose some of the information, the configuration, whatever it is, historical data about that device just because I'm swapping it out. That's where that replace could come in handy for you. Oops, darn it. Let's try this again. and then apply. And then that device is going to come on back in. So since I deleted it, my historical data is going to be gone from it, but it's going to pull it. It's going to take it a few minutes here. I can do a force pull. The force pull just does an SNMP query. By default, it's either 5 or 10 minutes that it takes for it to perform an SSH over to the device, get logged in, pull the configuration, and compare it. So while we're waiting on that, something I promised you guys earlier was to show you, this is my Aruba CX switch. So this is the switch that I'm using today. So as of, I'm on our latest 8.2 version of software. We don't have those really cool views that we did on our AOSS switches. We still have the data, and the data can still be exported in reporting. We can look at the POE and all of those other fun things. We just don't have our cool front panel views to see that type of information. So we have this type of menu system sort of, or scrolling method. So I wanted to point that out. But again, the data is still there. The POE, the different capabilities that we might want to look at are still within the device. In fact, I'm saying POE and I just forget where we hide that. I think we have to go to interfaces. This is not showing the power drawn, and it's supposed to. I think it's just in a different spot here for me. But this power drawn, I thought, showed up here. So that's either a little bug or something else that I have going on. Choose columns. Well, I'm not in the right spot for POE, but there is a POE view. I'm drawing a blank on where that is at the moment. I didn't take, my notes didn't go all the way through every little config option on where to go for that. But it's also available to you in a report. And in fact, I will step on down. Oh no, I wanted to start with a client. And let's go to connected clients. I wanted to just show you some of the client details and data that we can see, and then we'll trickle down to reports here to kind of close that out. So when I'm monitoring my whole environment, so that includes the switches, whether they're Cisco or Juniper, or whatever else you might have, hopefully Aruba, but it doesn't have to be, again, with AirWave. I'm pulling this topology information, right? So I know what it takes for my client to get onto the network. And I can see that path along the way here. So I'm seeing what wireless I've joined. I'm seeing the access point that I'm on, the switch, and then eventually that virtual controller. If I'm monitoring even more upstream, I can see even more data a little further. And if one of these wasn't going great, I'm going to see these little dots change from green to yellow to red. Maybe my switch port uplink to that access point has interface errors, or maybe the access point isn't getting enough power. That dot could change colors, or the radio is too heavily utilized. I'm going to see data that can help me figure out kind of what's going on with these users. So as I'm coming in here to try to troubleshoot a problem because a user called up, or whatever the case may be, I want to look at something. This is where you would go to take a look at that. The clarity data, now I'm zooming in just on this one device, right? How is this user being treated on the network? Well, the DHCP took a while, so did the authentication tab. Now, this first time was actually when I had to go type in my password. So had to type in a username and password. That took me 5.5 seconds, minus however long it took the Radius server to respond. So that's why that first one was longer, right? But then after that, I kicked my device off the network a few times so that I could get a little bit more data here for us to look at. And that's what we can see there. These are all older events. This was back when I was when I had my other hardware here on the within AirWave. And then I can see a little bit more about what's going on with that client. We're seeing the channels, right? How things are going. Oh yeah, I didn't show visual RF. We'll pull that up here as well as the reporting. AirSlice, I don't believe I have any AirSlice policy on the lab environment, but if I did, I would be able to see that. And then some traffic analysis. Computer's not doing much right now. It's just sitting there next to me. I tried to do a ping when my internet was down, and apparently some DNS queries. The search function up here also is very helpful. So sometimes, right, we get a call that says, hey, I have some problems, but I don't know really what's going on. We can use that search function to plug in information about the client. I think this was the IP address I was getting. So we could search and find us this way. If we were, wrong key combination. If we're doing 802.1x, we could also just type in that person's username and then potentially, right, see a few different devices that they're on. This was my phone. I think, I believe this was my iPhone. I tried joining it just a little bit ago. So again, another way for us to find those users and zoom in without having to click on the client list and wade through potentially thousands of people based on what site we think they're at. That search is really quick and helpful for us up there. Rapids, I'm not going to touch too much on. I'll show it to you. The rogue devices, again, are the devices that we know are in the air and on the wire. Suspected rogues, these are really, in my opinion, if you're monitoring your whole environment, suspected rogues are mostly useless. They're usually just a hotspot, a phone, somebody's car driving by, right? It's wireless that's nearby. I usually don't look through the suspected rogue type category much or at all. But that's what that type of value would be for us. We can set up some IDS events, rules, and things if we actually wanted to do any type of containment. You do need to be careful legally. You can only contain a rogue. You can't contain someone else. Marriott got in trouble for that and had to pay a big fine because they were trying to sell wireless at their convention center space probably 10 years ago now, and they were pushing it by blocking other users from using their own hotspots and got in trouble for it. So the FCC said you can't do that. It's unlicensed spectrum. You can only contain something that's within your control and perimeter of your physical hardware, basically. So when that hits your LAN, it's now on your network and you have the ability to control it. Visual RF. So the really cool, I love using visual RF for different tools or different customers, sites, things like that. So I have a lot of things loaded in here that I didn't delete just so I can always go back to it. But we will look at my dad's RV park over in the bustling metropolis of Deming, New Mexico. Whoops. Zoomed in there. Oh, just go back a view. Try it again. My Mac mouse got a little carried away on me there. Okay, so here we are. So this is the heat map view. So it's pretty good size park, and he's got 3 APs. So he only has 80 meg internet. So that's usually the bottleneck versus a slow signal. So we don't do too much in terms of anything overly high a high density or something that you'd probably see in an office space. There's one little access point here radiating out in the in like kind of the main clubhouse area. There's one on a tower here, and then one way back in the back corner there near kind of a manager's office. I'm going to turn off some of these little, check boxes. We wanted to see the heat map. I wanted to turn off clients. There we go. Just so that you can see, this is usually what we'd come to when we're actually doing a predictive heat map. We'd load in your own office space floor plan, drop access points, draw walls, set your coverage boundary of where you need RF coverage, and then it can automatically place access points. So if we come on over here, we could say, hey, you know what? I want to either manually drop them and place them, or I think I need to unlock. Maybe it's at the main site right here. We can have it actually. It's not the right spot either. We can have it automatically calculate, though, the type of access point coverage and placement based on what you'd need. And I'm in the wrong spot again for that. But in the essence of time, I won't poke through here. But there is a spot essentially to. Yeah, darn it, I'm in the wrong spot. Anyway, for it to automatically calculate and give you that 90% approximation, right, of where you're going to need access points based on the data that you've given it. So again, based on the walls and the types, if it's a drywall versus a glass wall versus an elevator shaft, concrete, those are different, and that needs to be accounted for if you're going to get good results. But anyway, it is some pretty neat data. And again, if this access point were to fail, we're going to see this one, well, this one's on a Wi-Fi uplink, but if it wasn't, it would power up, as would this one, to try to help cover that gap of where those, or where that dead spot showed up. The clients in a higher higher AP dense environment, these clients will have a much better kind of a triangulation of where they would be at. This, I wouldn't put too much stock in the location, as well as the ones that are just hanging out way up here. You can move them if you really wanted to. But in a normal office space, you're going to get a pretty good approximation of where those types of devices and things are. And then one other thing I wanted to show here before we stop for questions is rogues. So if you did have a concern about rogues in your environment, you can even show the SSID so that you can, I think it, oh yeah, it's showing, just not, you have to mouse over it. But you can use this information to say, hey, you know what? I do see a rogue in my environment. I know that this access point was the first one that saw it because I'm looking in my alerts. But I want to get a better idea of where it's at. I want to know who's the cluster of desks to start looking at, right? You can do that to help you better triangulate and figure out where that is at. I'm going to conclude here with reports, and then we'll break for questions. I ran a couple pre-canned reports earlier yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. First one here, I'll show an inventory report. A lot of times people say, hey, you know what? I want to know when, or I need to renew maintenance. I need a really good inventory of what I have. They're asking for serial numbers, and I deleted my SharePoint file. It's gone forever, right? You can go pull that right here. It's going to show you the hardware. And you can customize, tune this, export it, and tweak it as well. This was just kind of the pre-canned settings for us. So I'm getting data in here that maybe I don't care about, like the virtual controllers. Those wouldn't have a serial number. They don't need maintenance, that type of thing. But I can see the information in here that I would need to run a support request through. RF Health, I ran this one yesterday as well. So, and again, these can be pre-scheduled. They can be of whatever time period you would like. The reporting capability, I'll show you in just a minute. You can define it by just saying, basically, when do you want the report to run? And I did all of these for 1 week ago. So whenever that report kicks off, it runs from the last weeks of data. You can also have it be a static week or something like that if you wanted. But it gives us just some views. We have a lot of information, right? And I want to be able to do something with it. So this could be one of the ways that you want to take a look at that data. The top APs. This one, it's a more manageable batch. I set it for every 5 minutes, and it ran it for just a day. But something like this, you can say, hey, you know what? I want to know my access point with well, these are all about the same clients, just based on where I was at. Maybe just when was my busiest time of day, right? Average usage out. There we go. So right around lunchtime was my busiest time of day, and my least busy time of day was the middle of the night. But it's an editable report, or not editable, but kind of tunable, right? It's not just static data for us to look at, but we can click on those column headings to see that data a little differently. The definitions, I'll just show you the one in here. Do we have any other questions that have come in, Brianna?
We do not.
All right. Oh yeah, that one wouldn't have a time period associated with it. It just pulls the data directly. So here we are, RF Health. This is where I picked a few different groups and devices. I didn't want to look at my 6 gigahertz because I don't have one, although I did a summary on it. And then you can just type in a week ago. We can also pick from some drop downs. A last week, things like that are values here that we can use. We have a file again within AirWave in the documentation that shows you how to kind of build out the reports based on what you're going to need and schedule them if you want. And I thought of this. I'll close with triggers. I didn't touch on it, or I talked about it, but I didn't show you. But triggers, again, they're an email alert. I believe it can also be like a syslog and maybe an API type of trigger. But it's going to tell you when something happened, right, within your environment. What do I want to know when something happened? Well, I want to know when device comes up. I want to know when it reboots, maybe, because if I'm only monitoring every 5 minutes and the device reboots in 2 minutes, I might not catch it, right? So I want to know, again, when it comes up, when it reboots, those types of things. And there's a lot of different things that we can set for our triggers. So I won't go through all of these, but as I mentioned before, right? Clarity data. I want to know when my DHCP takes too long to respond, or my authentication failure percent is 10% or more, whatever might be meaningful for your environment. A nightly backup fails, right? If I don't have a good backup, I need to know about that. So you can add and set these up and then have it email or alert out up at the top here, depending if you have someone in the NOC that's watching, you could have it trigger, populate at the top, and or you could have it email you. So I think that that about covers it. Happy to take on any questions that maybe anybody's had, or any other requests, anything to look at.
I don't think so. I think you've done a very extensive, comprehensive training today, and we really appreciate it. I have to say that it's very hard within our company right now to find an AirWave trainer. So we're just so
Yeah.
grateful for the time that you provided. This is our most popular on-prem solution, and
Hmm.
many of my customers are still utilizing this. So thank you very
Yeah.
much for taking the time to build a custom lab to
Yeah.
go into, all of the different feature sets and provide, all of the tools and really go into depth so that all of the attendees here are able to really function and and
Uh-huh.
create all of the settings and so forth that they would require to successfully run this solution. So
Yeah.
um, at this point, what we're going to do is I will provide a recording. I really feel like those that were not able to attend, and I know a few offhand that really need this training, I
Yeah.
know they're going to be very grateful that we recorded this session. And I can't thank you enough, Jason. I mean, your expertise in a solution that we have very few within our company that really understand and can train the way that you have today. So what a gift, and thank you for all your time today. If anybody has any questions afterward, please let us know. You can reach out to us. It won't be a problem. You can reach out on this
All right.
Teams invite as well, and we will receive your message. And then we'll go from there. Please
There we
take the
are.
time to provide your valuable feedback. We will have a feedback survey that's going out, and we hope to host another one of these trainings within the next quarter.